Arts Project Australia, we like to call ourselves a centre of excellence, because we are, that supports artists with intellectual disabilities. And we do that through supporting them in the studio, where we are now, as well as promoting their work and, really importantly, advocating for the inclusion of their work in the contemporary art sector. So it's not seen as a form of art on its own, it's artwork that sits well and resonates across the contemporary art sector. Once upon a time, there was a lady called Myra Hilgendorf, and her daughter Joanna was profoundly intellectually disabled, and Myra was an artist herself, and she thought that the art that Joanna produced was really valid and resonated and was, you know, worthy of being exhibited. And Myra, being the sort of person she was, gathered a whole lot of like-minded people around her and started Arts Project in 1974, so 39 years ago. And it was just a volunteer committee to start with, and in the first probably 8 years there was no studio. It was about collecting work, curating exhibitions and doing it professionally. And then Cheryl Day, who was a member of the founding committee, said, why don't we start our own studio? And part of the reason for that, I think there's many reasons, was that a lot of the work that was collected, and it was often collected from institutions in those days, was on really poor materials. We still have all that work and it's deteriorating. So one of the studio philosophies very early on was high quality materials, so the work has value and the work will last. And that's core today still. So it grew from, I think, a 2-hour, once-a-week studio program to 5.5 days a week and owning our own fabulous building 39 years later.
Another sleepless night, another empty cup of tea. But I never let it show.
Knowing Me, Knowing You is a line from an ABBA song that is about the idea of knowing somebody else. So this project aimed to match together 10 pairs of artists who didn't know each other necessarily, but through this process of working together, they would come to know each other.
So Knowing Me, Knowing You is actually a manifestation of a couple of projects. The first one was called Double Take, where our artists responded to the work of external artists. A couple of years ago we did Portrait Exchange, where we actually paired up our artists with external artists and they did portraits of each other.
Both those shows also used collaboration between artists from Arts Project and external artists. So that was the similarity, but there was a lot of differences too, especially between Portrait Exchange. Knowing Me, Knowing You was over a year, spanned over a year, and there was no outcome was prescribed, so artists could really come up with their own work over a much longer period and develop their ideas.
So the first thing that we will do with these is we'll make sure that they're flat on the back, okay? So what we want to do is we'll get some brush-on silicone and we'll brush it all over to get all the fine details, and you can, with the silicone we can do undercuts.
When people ask him what we're doing and he says, oh, we're making babies. It's so great.
We're making babies.
Yeah, we are, the hard way.
Nathan and Chris, I think they were inspired by Ron Mueck's Giant Baby, and they used that process of casting silicone. Neither of them knew how to do that, so they really started both from a very low base, I think, and then kind of worked through all the struggles together.
The interest of the project for me was the fact that we were both learning a new process. When someone asked him why he was doing it, he says, well, I don't have any kids. And I think that's, I think that's good. I don't think this can really take the place of a child, but I think it's a lovely kind of aspiration, yeah.
In the tired hours.
By watching how he worked and knowing how I worked, I could see that there was something that was quite similar. He can look at something, he can understand it three-dimensionally, and just make it, which is phenomenal. I'd be sort of going, oh, I might need a pattern for that.
So Terry and Jenny worked together with their textile-based practice. Jenny really quickly set up this way of communicating through the actual making of the work.
I think he found what I did interesting and he found it humorous, and there's definitely a level of humour that we both share in making. Like the mouths are hilarious. He made, as you see in the show, this mouth, and each tooth is kind of articulated, and I thought, oh, I can make a mouth. I've got this split cricket ball, and I've got all these clay pipes that I sort of got out of the Thames, and they make great horrible teeth, and a tongue, and he just thought that was hilarious, And the two are just, it's a bit like how we worked. You see, you think, you make, and it comes out. So that's what the work's representing, really.
5-year-old Danny Broccoli, that's a ripper. 5-year-old Danny Broccoli. I'm going to tell my 9-year-old that.
So Jim and Stephen had worked together in the Portrait Exchange and in Double Take, so they knew a lot about each other, and I think Jim had known of the existence of Stephen's joke books.
He carried around all these notebooks, these little crumpled up little spiral-bound notebooks, full of jokes. They range from like knock knock, to the most revolting, kind of really sort of rude, not revolting, but something that Derek and Clive could have easily got away with. Knowing what I did about Stephen from our previous experience meant that the idea was quite obvious to me that we should do something based on those joke books, because they were so much a part of his personality. They were part of the personality that he wished to project to people. So his public face is one of humour and let me tell you a joke.
He was really keen for these books to be illustrated in some way, turned into an artist book, which is what Jim has done a lot with other artists in kind of collaborative bookmaking projects. Martin has had quite a long association with Arts Project because he used to work at the print workshop, and a lot of the artists had been there. He worked with Kate, who also shared an interest in birds.
I came in and had a look at her folio, and there was something about birds, which my practice over the last couple of years has involved birds, using birds as a motif. I think at the stage, Kate must have done some etchings of birds or parrots or something. And so there was the etching connection, or the printmaking connection, plus the imagery connection.
They made an animation, which is a very simple story about birds meeting.
She'd make a drawing, and then it's stop motion, the classic sort of stop motion animation where you just make one frame, another frame, another frame.
It's only a subtle variation, but put all together you get this, magical sort of movement.
In 2010, I was invited to be involved in the Portrait Exchange. I spent quite a lot of time with Cathy. We became quite connected during that process. We really bonded. We've got parallel lives almost because of our age and our name, and somehow we've connected as artists. Love my glass, and we both wear glasses.
Catherine's always fond of saying they have a lot in common, and the thing that they decided to explore with this exhibition was their childlessness.
The work that we've done for the Knowing Me, Knowing You exhibition looks at the human-animal relationship, but also the maternal instinct, and how, I guess, how the pet could be a substitute for the child, and how your emotion and your feelings are shown towards that pet. Your loving relationship towards that pet is quite an intimate relationship.
Catherine uses some baby clothes that her mother had kept for her own, hopefully, grandchildren, and she uses those clothes to dress up her dogs, and Cathy does the same. So the two videos are side by side. It's a very poignant kind of exploration of childlessness, and by two very different women, and childless for probably two very different reasons. Annalea and Cam had worked together on the portrait exchange.
So since that time, you know, we discovered, you know, I've got a VW car, he loves the car, so we've been doing a lot of painting with that. And we've thought a lot about taking the art out into public space. We went into the city with Dan, Camakaris carer, and we saw a lot of paste-ups, didn't we? So we decided to make those portraits of Cameron and I and the van into paste-ups.
You're my little heart.
They put up a billboard in Barclay Street above Trocadero Art Space for this project. Considering that Cam is an artist who is restricted by his disability and has to travel with his carer everywhere, I think that was just a really wonderful moment to have this billboard launched in the middle of Barclay Street, Footscray.
The Sisters Hayes started working with Paul like officially in 2010, starting to work on Napoleon, which was a kind of group devised project collaboration that we did, inspired by the fact that, well, Paul looks like a little bit like Napoleon and was painting Napoleon, and Napoleon was on at the NGV, and we went there and we just got really inspired by a lot of things and decided to do a dance video.
Paul was able to explore his love of dance with that work. So their second video is similar in that they chose a painting from the NGV collection and kind of brought that painting to life, and they all played different characters.
It was fun, even pretending to be something that you're not in your practice, like pretending to be a ballerina.
And yeah, we probably wouldn't have thought of being in a dance film ourselves, and that was a big leap, trusting Paul.
Yeah.
You know,
like having him show us what he does, and even just participating in what is a really big part of his artistic practice.
Yeah.
Fiona and Angela worked a lot in Angela's printmaking studio in Brunswick. So they did a kind of combination of painting and printmaking, sort of both bringing their different skills to the project.
Well, when we started, we just we spoke about what we liked, and Fiona told me about, you know, things that she'd been doing, and I told her things I've been doing. She showed me her work, and I showed her my work. And the one thing that became apparent is that we both use buildings in our work, but when we started talking about travelling, Fiona just brought in piles of photos.
I went to the Tiananmen Square and had my photo taken out at Tiananmen Square with Special Olympics athletes and parents.
They both share a love of travel, so they realised pretty early on that would be the thing that would link them. So they sort of brought that together and created diptychs, half painted, half printed. And Fiona was very keen, I think, to pursue her interest in printmaking. Stephen and Rebecca hadn't met, I'm pretty sure, prior to the portrait exchange.
We set up the project, so we had two large canvases, and we would both start one each. So we would work from a starting point on each and doing the founding layers or the foundation layers and things like that. We swapped 3 times, and each layer was built upon and built upon and built upon with each exchange, and that is where the imagery came from and came to the forefront. In a collaboration like this, you're working, you're building it together, separately but together, and you're both working towards the same goal, and reacting to Rebecca's brushstrokes to create a completed image in a manner that I would not have otherwise been led to complete. It was, yeah, amazing.
The exhibition wasn't the main focus of the project. For me, it was about the relationships that would develop over a year and the process and how people would resolve this problem of creating some equal space together. But in fact, the exhibition was a really fantastic exhibition and the work was really interesting and in its own right. So I think that was a bit of a bonus for me, the finished work.
They say it's good for the heart, they say it's good for the mind, they say the people we love, we leave behind.
I've never done a project of this depth. I think depth is the best way to describe it. You know, the length of time, 12 months is time for a meaningful collaboration. It can also be time for a meaningful death of a relationship, you know, it really depends on how it goes. But it's giving people those opportunities. And we haven't had to pressure anyone to be involved in this. The people who are involved in it really want to be involved, and I think we probably could have, you know, filled those spots 3 or 4 times over. Now that more people are hearing about it.
The world of people with a disability is often a little bit inaccessible to people without a disability, and I think what we've done with Knowing Me, Knowing You is give people a pathway into this different world. I think the artists, consistently, the artists who are introduced to the studio always want to come back, always want to be a part, and have really been enriched by the project.
Having my own practice pushed and stretched as well, and working in a responsive way rather than just on your own, where you really get to dictate the terms of how the image is constructed.
I think out of these collaborations, it's just the joy of working with someone to create something that I wouldn't normally do.
Personally, I've learnt a lot from people who are different to me, and I think we all can. And I think especially when we share, when we're coming at it from a shared position. So everyone in this show was an artist. So if you take away the disability, take away the lack of disability, they're both pairs are artists, and that's our starting point. And I think as artists, you know, we're open to all sorts of different practices and all sorts of different ways of working, and I think that can only enrich one's practice, and in actual fact, I think it can enrich one's life.